Welcome to Ralph Next. Today we're going to be seeing how exactly you can build this fear and greed index using Next.js. So before building this fear and greed index, you need to understand what it is. The fear and greed index is like a thermometer for the crypto market. Yeah. So it tells if the investors are feeling scared or greedy, meaning if the index is high, it means the people are really greedy, and if the index is low, it means the people are scared or they're in fear. Now, when you look at this fear and greed index, it's basically like a speedometer of your car, right? So it can go from zero to anything, like the max limit. In our case, it's going to be 0 to 100, right? And what exactly do you see when you look at the fear and greed index? From my situation, like what I can see when I look at it for the first time, I see a gauge, the gauge chart in the background, right? And then I see a cursor over there, just there. And I also see the strength of the fear and greed index at 72 over here and greed, right? So this is conditional. The greed is conditional, right? So from 0 to 49, it is going to be fear. If it's 50, it's going to be neutral. From 51 to 100, it's going to be greed. Okay. So first things first, let's build an SVG. I've fast forwarded this for you, and I've actually built this out. So if you go to Figma, I've already built a design file, right? And you can basically just click on it and you can export as an SVG over here, or you can also right click and copy and paste as SVG. Cool. And by the way, this is going to be the final product that we're going to build. And let's get started. We're going to be using Next.js. So let's open up iTerm2 and let's say npx create next app at latest, and then I'm going to say the name of the project is fear and greed, and TypeScript, yes, lint, yes, tailwind, yes, no, app, yes, input alias, no. So you can just hit enter for everything. The key thing to understand here is we're using Next.js with tailwind, right, for styles and everything. And yeah, you should be just fine if you follow along with everything. So this will download the boilerplate code, and we can then cd into the directory that was just created, which is fear and greed. And I can open up a VS Code instance for this. Boom. And then what I can do is I can get rid of item2 because we don't need it anymore. And I can open this up like so. Perfect. Now we can go ahead and use node 18. I'm not using node 18 by default. And then I can say npm run dev. That should open up the local instance or the local server. And once that is done, bingo. Cool. So this is how the boilerplate Next.js app looks like, and that's fine. We're going to edit this to make it look like this, right? So how exactly do we do it? We need to go to the app directory, and then in the app directory, we have globals, layout, and page.tsx. Layout just has like basic layout. That's fine. We are not going to touch it. And we're going to go to page, and we get rid of all the code inside main. Once you do that, you have like a blank slate, right? You have nothing right now. Now let's just see what's happening. Tailwind classes say it's a flex container with a flex direction of column, and then it's of height screen, and we have item center and justify between. Justify between is not required. Instead, we can say space y10 to add more spacing between the containers which are going to come now. Now what I'm going to do is div, right? Not a div actually. Let's go with a heading h2, and I'm going to say fear and greed. I'm going to add some class names just so that it's slightly more presentable, even the normal text. But our main focus is going to be on the gauge chart that we saw, right? So, and I'm going to call this text 3XL maybe. Yeah, that should be nice. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a container for the entire gauge chart. Okay. And this is going to be with padding of 20 so that it has nice spacing outside. And then it's going to be of background white, flex, justify center, item center, meaning it's centered in the flex container, and then rounded MD with shadow of MD. Why exactly are we doing this? So that the gauge chart is within a card, for example. Yeah. And once we do that, we're going to have another container of class name relative. So this is positioned relative, right? And then why exactly is this relative? Hold your thought right there. We'll talk about that when we get inside cursor. So now here's where our SVG comes into place. We go to the place, and then you can either export it as an SVG itself, or you can also just copy it as an SVG and get back. Paste it right there and hit save. Now let's see how our app looks. Go back. Boom. We're almost there. The key here is we are missing the cursor and we are also missing the actual indicator, right? The actual strength, the number over here. Let's get those implemented. First, we'll go with cursor, right? So for the cursor, what exactly am I going to do? I'm going to create a blank div element, self-closing, because this is just like a small ball there, right? So class name, it's going to be height 5, width 5, and it's going to be rounded full. So round fill is basically border radius of 99 pixels. That's fine. And background gray of 700 with a border of 2 and border white. Why exactly have I given a border here? This makes sense. This creates like a small ball. That's fine. Why exactly border 2 and border white? This is to give that practical illusion. For example, if we go back to CoinMarketCap, right? If you zoom into here, you can see that this cursor has like a white border. That is exactly what we're trying to recreate. So if you get back here, you can see we have the cursor, but you don't see the white border because it's not here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to position it absolutely. And this is why we have mentioned this to be a position of relative, the parent container to be a position of relative, right? Now I say absolute and top. I've already calculated this out for you. It's going to be 81 pixels and left is going to be minus 5 pixels. Why? It's because of the height of the gauge chart itself that we have designed in Figma. So yeah, and once you do that, you see the cursor is in the starting position of the gauge chart. So when it is 0, then this is how the cursor will look like, which is perfect. Now, what are we going to do? We are going to move this along the gauge chart. So how do we do that? Pretty simple. We go ahead and rotate it, right? That's it. It's not that difficult. So what are we going to do? Style. I'm going to use style because inline styles take more precedence over the class names, and that's just much better. And yeah, so transform, and over here, I'm going to give a string interpolation with a declared variable, which is going to come later on, rotate, and this. Now I'm going to go ahead and say degrees, and this placeholder, like the string interpolated variable, is going to be something called normalized angle. So const normalized angle equals, let's go with 0 initially, right? Or 180 initially. Yeah, and I can go ahead and say 180. Hit save. So when you look at this, what exactly you think is going to happen? You think that it's going to rotate to the last position of that gauge chart. That is not correct because at this point we are rotating it at at its origin, right? What does that mean? It means the circle is being rotated right there. So it means there'll be no change. So if I go back, you see there's no change, yeah? And that's fine. Now, how exactly do we make it go along this line? So how exactly do you make sure that this goes along this SVG like so, rather than just being rotated like this? So what we do is we basically have something called transform origin, and we declare it to go along that SVG. So let's get that done. We go back to the style. We say transform origin 93.5 pixels and 8 pixels. Save it. Go back and boom. So it goes from 0 to 180. That's fine. Let's check with 50. Oh, I did not use the variable here. So I can use the variable here and I can say 50, save, right? So what do you think will happen now? Does it go to center? No, it's still the angle. So it's going to be like slightly behind the center, and yeah, so if you go back, there we go. So now we have the angle position set and the cursor is moving along the SVG as we want. That's perfect. How do we make this move dynamically, like according to the fear and greed index? So for that, we need to call some API that will give us a response of this fear and greed index from 0 to 100, right? Let's get that done. But before getting that done, do you think if we pass 0 to 100, it'll properly align with the entire SVG? No, that won't happen. To do that, we need to first normalize the angle from 0 to 100, right? So for that, we need a normalize angle function. I've already written this for you. So this normalized angle function takes a value and then the maximum value is defined, that is 100 because it's 0 to 100, and then minimum angle is 0, maximum angle is 180. That's perfect. Now the normalized angle is value multiplied by max angle minus min angle divided by max angle plus min angle. Do not worry, this is a basic mathematical function that helps you normalize things, right? Don't get too confused. That's fine. Now we are going to be using this normalize angle to get our normalized angle from the actual score. Now, imagine that your fear and greed index, right? I'm gonna call it FNG. Yeah, FNG. And I'm gonna say this is going to be like 20 now. Okay. This is the score of your fear and greed index. Now, how do we check this? We can say const normalized angle equals normalized angle of FNG. So this will make sure that you get the normalized angle from the function over here by passing FNG, right? And you pass it down to transform. So if I save this, go back, does that seem like 20? Yeah, but how can we verify? By giving the fear and greed index score as 50, for example. Save that, go back, you see? It's there in the center now, which is absolutely amazing. Now, what we need to do is we need to write like a function to fetch the data from our fear and greed index API. Let's get that done. But before doing that, we're in Next.js 14, right? So we can use the functions of server components and everything. Now we're on page. So how can we supercharge ourselves? Just say const home equals this and this. So you make this like an arrow function, and don't forget to export default home, right? Now this is ready. What you have to do, or the reason for doing this, was basically to do an FNG fetch, right? So what exactly this looks like? It's going to await fetch this API. And since we're using await, this is going to be async. And yeah, now what exactly is this API? Let's have a look before we call it, right? So if we go back, this is an open API that gives us the value of the fear and greed index. This is not the one that is being used by CoinMarketCap, and that's fine. I've already asked CoinMarketCap. They do not have an API exposed for the fear and greed index. So for that, we're using this alternative, right? Which is literally called alternative, api.alternative.me. And over here, you get the value of 70. And that's perfect. Now, if we do a get request over here, you will be getting this exact value. By the way, if you're like wondering what exactly or why exactly am I getting this view, or you might be having some other view, right? This is because I'm using an extension called JSON view. You can go ahead and have a look, but yeah. Now let's get back. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to just do a .json, and then we are going to go inside and get the actual value, right? So how did this even come in? If we go back, you can see that in the response, we're getting like name, data, and metadata. And inside data, there's one array where the first position of the array has the value key, and that has the value of 70, right? That's exactly what we're doing. So we have the actual response. Go inside the response, you have data, the first element in data, and then the value. And that gives you the fear and greed index value. Perfect. So now, if everything worked well, our fear and greed index should be like at 70. The position of the cursor should be at 70. So save, go back, boom. So it's somewhere around 70, which is exactly 70 otherwise. So yeah, now that that is done, the next thing that we have to do is we have to like generate the copy, right? We need a function that gives us the exact copy. Remember, I added some constraints that, for example, if your fear and greed index is from 0 to 49, it's going to be like fear. If it's 50, it's going to be neutral. 51 to 100 is going to be greedy, right? Or greed. So we're going to be having a function that's pretty simple. It checks the value of fear and greed index. Is it greater than 50? Return greed. Is it less than 50? Return fear. Else return neutral. Simple, right? With that done, now what we are going to do is we are going to create another div element below the cursor. And what exactly is this div element? It's a flex with a direction of column, and then we are centering it using item center and justify center, and then we're saying it's going to have a text gray of 700, so the text color is going to be 700, and absolutely position to almost the center, but slightly above to match like CoinMarketCap gauge chart. And then inside here, we are showing the fear and greed index value itself. Perfect. And then we're also showing the copy. Go back, and now you can see that we have the fear and greed index in place. So everything is there, right? So you have the SVG background element, you have the cursor, you also have the actual indicator value. So everything is cool, right? And the last thing that we have to do is componentize things. This is not how your code should look. This is a simple piece of code and it should not take like 75 lines. So we're going to componentize this like expected. So we're going to copy this thing and then we are going to close this. We're going to create a directory, click on components or just type components and then open this up. And then now say cursor.tsx, tsrafce. By the way, if you're wondering how exactly am I doing this autocomplete and everything, this is ES7 plus snippet that allows me to write this, like a boilerplate component code. And now I can pass down the normalized angle here. And I'm going to call this cursor props, just like so. And inside cursor props, we're going to say normalized angle with number. And just like that, our component is ready. We can remove this useless import. That's fine. And save, go back. And now I can say cursor, right? And import the cursor. Normalized angle equals normalized angle. And go back. It should function exactly the same way. Perfect. Then the next step, yes. So we're going to be having the indicator values itself. So I'm going to call this indicator. The component is still not created, but we'll be passing something called fng, right? So once you pass that, you need to create the component first, right? So go to indicator. By the way, guys, whenever you're creating a component, make sure it starts with the uppercase letter. So yeah, tsrafce, and our function is created, or functional component is created, and then you pass this down. And over here, you can just say fng as the prop, and I'm going to call this indicator props. Pass this down there, and then say fng number, right? It's still not right because we don't have the get fng copy function. The reason is I wanted to have this inside because all of the related functions should actually be in that component. Since we are not using this get fng copy anywhere else, we are just going to have this in the indicator component. If in case this was being reused over and over again, we can have like utils directory where we have all the functions co-located, right? Separately. Or you can also have a utils file where you have everything co-located. Anyways, now that we have handled that, the indicator function is already ready, like functional component is ready. And now we can import it. Cool. And the final piece of the puzzle is SVG. So we're going to copy this SVG, create a new component called gauge, right? TSRAFCE, just the basics, the drill, save it, get rid of the props because we're not using props in this case. Right? Save. And then now we can say import. Cool. So that is pretty much it. And we have coded the fear and greed index with, yeah, literally nothing. We haven't used any libraries. We just used one API from alternative.me. Shout out to them. And we were able to create this fear and greed index that is there in CoinMarketCap. Let me know how you feel. If you have any questions, drop a comment down below. I'll answer all of them and have a good one. Ciao.